Hey everyone, I'm Tim and this is my channel 40 Times Around. Today we're going to talk about how I've outfitted my adventure motorcycle for more rugged off-road terrain. And I also have some super exciting news. I picked up a new sponsor, AltRider. For those of you who aren't familiar, AltRider is a Seattle-based company that makes gear and accessories for adventure touring motorcycles, things like this, but they also make parts for all kinds of other bikes. Today we're going to talk about what I've installed on my bike to get ready for some super remote, rugged terrain I'll be tackling in the near future. I'm really excited to talk about some innovative design features they've incorporated and some things that I've actually got a chance to test out in the last month since I installed everything. Stick around. So like I said, I installed this stuff about a month ago and I've had a chance to test it out in some pretty grueling terrain. I did a little bit of the Mabder, it was fairly muddy, and I did get a chance to test out this side of the Crashbars. Haven't tested out the other side yet, but I'm sure I'll be doing that soon. Crashbars, I'm happy to report, perform as advertised. Now, another thing I've had a chance to test out is a little bit of maintenance with these parts installed. One of the neat features about the skid plate is that you actually don't have to remove it to dump the oil. Another thing is you don't have to remove the crash bars to swap out spark plugs. Really neat feature, and it saves me a lot of time and makes my life a lot easier on the road. So like I said, I am going to be working with AltRider, and I could not be more proud to be affiliated with this company. They've come up with some super innovative design features. They've really put a lot of thought and care into their products. So let's go ahead and dive into what I've installed on this bike to get ready for more rugged off-road terrain. Let's get started near the bottom of the motorcycle with the lower crash bars, which integrate with the skid plate. It's 1¼ inch thick stainless steel tubing, or 32 millimeters. Right out of the gate, one of the features that appealed to me about this was the easy access to cylinder heads, meaning changing spark plugs or adjusting valves can be done without removing the crash bars. Another neat feature is that it doesn't rely on the motor as a mount, which deflects the impact away from the engine. Just below that is the skid plate, which is a 3/16 inch thick tire-to-tire protection. There's no bolts on the bottom side that could snag or catch something. On the bottom of the skid plate is a circular hole to access the engine oil drain plug, so you don't need to remove the skid plate to dump the oil. Although, when I changed my oil, I did find that it was a bit easier to drop the skid plate, which really isn't all that difficult. Either way, it's a really simple process. Moving up to the upper crash bars, which are a 1-inch stainless steel, it has 3 connection points which disperse the force during an impact. The idea behind this is to protect the upper fairings and radiator. 550 pounds plus of motorcycle coming down at speed and hitting the ground is a great way to destroy your radiator, so protecting it and not leaving yourself defenseless is incredibly important. Speaking of the radiator, there's also a Radiator Guard, a 1/16 inch thick anodized aluminum guard. It's spaced a 1/2 inch away from the radiator to enable airflow. Moving back over to the engine, there are cylinder head guards. They bolt on the front and behind the heads to spread force. It's a 1/8 inch aluminum, which protects from scratches, dents, dings, etc. Unfortunately, I didn't have these on when I first bought this motorcycle, and so instead of protecting from those things, it's covering a few scratches up. On the surface of the guard is a replaceable skid pad, and in between the cylinder head and the guard are some rubber pads that separate the guard from the valve cover. So moving a little forward from there is the header guards. Now unfortunately I didn't install these when I first got the bike because I have some pretty big dents in my header pipes, but fortunately I didn't get any punctures while I was out there, so that's the good side. But now I don't have to worry about that with 1.5 millimeter thick stainless steel to protect my header pipes from rocks and debris that gets kicked up from the front tire. Up here are the air intake guards. They keep the air filter free of debris like insects, leaves, dirt, etc. Up here is the headlight guard. Just to put this into perspective, the headlight on this bike could be anywhere from $800 to $1,800 to replace depending on the setup on your bike. That is definitely not something you want to have to replace if it gets hit with a rock. Even if you're not off-road, just going down the highway, a lot of things are bouncing around and falling off of trucks. It wouldn't be hard to crack that headlight, so having a cover on it is definitely a lot of peace of mind. The headlight guard comes in either mesh or a clear polycarbonate. I decided to double up on them because I like the way that the mesh looks, but the polycarbonate I think actually performs a little bit better, and it keeps the bugs off of the actual lens of the headlight, which I used to have to reach in between the mesh and the headlight to get all the bugs off. Down here by the front wheel, there's an ABS sensor. It's critical, meaning it's needed, and it's expensive to replace. In other words, it's really important to protect this. Back here is the rear brake master cylinder. Same as the ABS sensor, it's critical and expensive. And something I found out this year is susceptible to damage and braking is the rear brake reservoir. I had dropped the bike somewhere in Idaho. I must have hit a rock or something because the little piece that mounts to the bike had cracked, so it was just kind of hanging on by a thread and real wiggly and wobbly. I had to replace the reservoir. Fortunately, it didn't crack or anything like that, but having broken it once, at least the mounting portion of it, leads me to believe that it's susceptible to cracking and breaking. My rear brake's kind of important, especially when I'm riding off-road, so that is something I'm feeling much better about having protected. Over on the left side by the side stand is a little switch. This is a major weak point on this bike. It could actually disable the vehicle. If you're out in the middle of the desert, 100 miles from the nearest glass of cold water, that is definitely not a good situation to be in, having a side stand fault code that disables the motorcycle. It's easy enough to protect with this little metal guard. Speaking of the side stand, parking this big heavy motorcycle off-road on soft surfaces or even on hot tar in the desert is liable to sink in and tip over the bike. That's why I put on this side stand footprint enlarger. Something they did to make sure that this performs well is make sure that they made it as lightweight as possible. This prevents the side stand from accidentally dropping down as you hit bumps. Every ounce counts in that situation. You definitely don't want a heavy footprint on the side stand weighing it down. So that's it in terms of protection. Now I did a few other things as well to kind of help me get a little further off the beaten path. One of them is the luggage rack, which I'm able to strap a lot of gear to. Comes with a lot of options for strapping things. It integrates with a Rotopax, a ram mount, and several different luggage options. And it can also be mounted in 2 different positions. Now, I decided to go with the Rotopax, which brings me to the next piece of gear that I added. That is the Rotopax mount. There are extensions available, but I opted for the locking mount, which does not work well with the extension. This Rotopax fuel pack is 1.75 gallons. They also come in 1 and 2 gallons. You could get either a fuel or a water container. I opted for fuel. I have a different strategy for carrying water. Something that's made a substantial difference in my comfort on the bike is these pivot pegs. Basically, they allow your foot and your ankle to find a comfortable position. They swivel back and forth, so when you're sitting down, if your toes need to fall a little bit lower than your heel to be comfortable, the pivot pegs allow you to do that. I was actually getting some pretty bad knee pain leading up to swapping these out, and I've noticed a substantial difference in my comfort and not getting any pain in my knee since I put these on. If you do any kind of long distance riding, I definitely recommend these. Plus it takes a little bit of pressure off your ankles when you're off-road bouncing over logs and sticks and rocks and everything else. Now, the piece of gear that I am most thrilled with, the piece of gear that would have saved my hide on the Idaho BDR. Some of you guys have seen that video recently where I talked about how I almost got ran off the road by an SUV. Had I had this next piece of gear I'm going to talk about, I probably would have been able to stop safely. The issue was I was in an emergency situation. I had to stop as soon as possible. I couldn't get to the rear brake in time, so I ended up pulling the front brake lever, which caused me to lock up my front tire and basically go over the handlebars. This next piece of gear is called the dual control brake system. It's going to compensate for the changing foot position when sitting or standing. Not having this could double the 0.5 to 1 second reaction time it takes to get to your brake. Basically, when you're standing up, reaching the brake pedal where it sits and is comfortable in a seating position, it's a little bit out of reach. The dual brake control system adds a 1-inch riser so that's basically exactly where your foot would be when you're standing, and when you're sitting down you just slide your foot slightly over and it's at the normal height. Now it also comes with an enlarger, which gives you a little bit more room to work with and extends it out away from the bike a little bit further. And another neat feature that I definitely could have used a few times in Idaho and in other situations is what's called a brake snake. This keeps branches, reeds, weeds, grass, and other debris from lodging in between the brake pedal and the motorcycle, potentially bending the brake lever or just jamming up the brake, rendering your stopping power inoperable. So that's all the gear I've installed. I will leave a link to AltRider's website in the description box down below. It's altrider.com. If you guys do want to check it out, they got a lot of cool stuff over there. If I gave you any good ideas on things you might want to add to your bike. They make parts for all different adventure bikes, not just the R1200GS. So make sure you go ahead and check them out. That is it for today, guys. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below and all of that good stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ride safe.